Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to some of you dialing in from overseas. Welcome to the Inclusive Business Forum 2020. We will start in a few minutes. I'm Tony. I will be your moderator for today. Today's event is organized by SG Enable and supported by Korn Ferry. I'm a senior client partner in the Korn Ferry Singapore office, and I lead the organization design practice. My passion is in helping companies transform their human capital. And human capital is particularly important in these extraordinary times as businesses are living through and positioning themselves to come out stronger from the current COVID crisis. I'm very much looking forward to the discussions we will have with you and with the impressive lineup of speakers and panelists we have arranged for this event. But as you get comfortable with your favorite beverage in front of your screen, let me take you through a bit of housekeeping. As you are already aware, we are using the Zoom platform. You may notice that all of you, as participants of the webinar, are muted. This is to prevent any background noise. Let me first take you some functionalities. Singapore Sign Language interpretation is provided by Irene. Irene is sharing her video, and she is indicated as SGSL interpreter on Zoom. For the best view, click View options at the top of your screen, and then select the side-by-side option. This will allow you to view both the live Singapore Sign Language interpreter and the speakers. You can also adjust the video sizes of both the Singapore Sign Language interpreter and the speakers by dragging the line divider left and right. Live captioning will also be provided, powered by iMedia. To enable live captions, click on the Close Caption function at the top or bottom of your screen. You can also adjust the size of your captions in subtitle settings. You can also access a live running script via the link in the chat box. We are welcoming your questions. If you have any questions for the speakers, please submit them via the Q&A function. You can also upvote submitted questions. Lastly, if you face any technical issues, please do not hesitate to reach out to us via the chat function. Feedback is very important for us, so we are inviting you to share your feedback at the end of this forum. Please also note that this webinar is being recorded. Okay, with this, let me hand over you to Winnie for the official welcome to the Inclusive Business Forum 2020. Winnie, over to you.
Thank you, Tony. Good morning, everyone. I'm Winnie, Head for Disability Inclusion at SG Enable. Welcome to the Inclusive Business Forum 2020. We organize this event once every 2 years, and this year marks the first time that it is held virtually. More than 1,000 people signed up, and it is heartening to have so many join us today. The theme of this year's forum is Workplace Disability Inclusion, a New Norm. Indeed, as we all adapt to a new norm in the future of work, innovating and redesigning jobs and workplaces that are inclusive is more relevant than ever before. Whether your organization is new or experienced with disability inclusion, we hope you will gain insights and inspiration from today's forum. Thank you once again for joining us. We'll now share with you the opening remarks by the Minister for National Development and Minister in charge of Social Services Integration, Mr. Desmond Lee.
Dear friends, good morning. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Inclusive Business Forum 2020. We hold this event every 2 years to promote disability-inclusive hiring and highlight best practices for employers and professionals. I'm glad that you have chosen to set aside time today to learn and share more about inclusive hiring, especially against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, where inclusive hiring may take a backseat for some. The economy has been severely disrupted by COVID-19. It has affected business revenue, operations, and manpower. Many people, including persons with disabilities, have been finding it harder to secure jobs. Training and internship opportunities are also more difficult to come by. During COVID-19, vulnerable persons with disabilities and their caregivers face additional stresses. So SG Enable quickly coordinated increased support through the CARE initiative funded from the MediaCorps Enabling Fund. They provided meals, temporary respite, and financial assistance. We also streamlined information so that it would be easier to find. COVID-19 related schemes for persons with disabilities were consolidated on SG Enable's Enabling Guide website. Agencies also help safe distancing enforcement officers better identify and engage persons with disabilities. But jobs remain top of mind for us. How do we help employers adapt and continue to hire and train persons with disabilities in a largely remote working environment? Now, we moved job support initiatives online as far as possible, while considering how persons with disabilities would be able to access these. To facilitate e-learning, SG Enable helped training providers to convert physical lessons into online modules. If training could not be conducted virtually, SG Enable put in place safe management practices to ensure that the health of clients and trainers were not compromised. We also continued to explore roles in sectors that are still hiring during COVID-19. For example, admin and HR, banking and finance, agri-tech and landscape, IT, cleaning, and the public sector. We made such vacancies available during SG Enable's virtual career fair in April. We will be holding another virtual training and career fair in the later part of this year, so please look out for it. The National Jobs Council will also look into job opportunities for persons with disabilities. And later this year, the Enabling Master Plan Work Group will also share their recommendations on how to better prepare persons with disabilities for the future economy. Now, effective in-house job coaches make a great difference to supporting employees who may have disabilities. They shape the workplace culture and environment, adjust work processes, and redesign job roles for persons with disabilities. Now, this helps employers to make sustained improvements in inclusive hiring. We therefore set up the Enabling Employment Initiative to build such a network of job coaches. We piloted this in the hotel industry and shared a preview with more than 70 hoteliers virtually last month. Although hotels are amongst the hardest hit by COVID-19, hoteliers such as Shangri-La Hotel and Pan Pacific Hotels Group have stayed committed to train and hire persons with disabilities. Shangri-La Hotel, in fact, reopened their School to Work internship program in June after the circuit breaker period ended. I hope their efforts will inspire employers in other sectors to step forward as well. Besides working with employers, I want to highlight some additional schemes for persons with disabilities, which will also help. Now, we increased the Open Door Program training grant at the start of July to cover 95% of course fees. We also increased training allowances and introduced a new training commitment award of $100 to encourage more to take up training. At the end of this year, we will replace the special employment credit with a new wage offset scheme called the Enabling Employment Credit to further incentivize employers to hire persons with disabilities, especially those who've been out of work for 6 months or more. Now, we are fortunate to hear from thought leaders, passionate practitioners, and professionals with disabilities today. Some, such as Ms. Jenny Le Fleury, the Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft, are persons with disabilities who are both experts in their field and role models for an inclusive workplace. Other younger speakers, Mr. Lim Zui Yang from GovTech and Mr. Jonathan Tiong, a student at the National University of Singapore, will share their experiences working and finding work. I'd like to thank the organizers, the speakers, and participants for supporting this forum. And I hope that you will take away practical strategies, be inspired to build a more inclusive workplace, and in so doing, build a more inclusive Singapore.
Thank you, Minister, for this very important and timely message. And indeed, for the quick mobilization of support through SG Enable, from training to hiring to coaching of people with disabilities. During this COVID crisis, we see all hands on deck as employers and the government come together to support the workforce holistically. With this, let's go straight to the keynote presentation, where we have a very important employer who has taken a very serious view and indeed is leading the way on accessibility and inclusion. For our keynote presentation today, we have two speakers from Microsoft. We will first welcome Ms. Jenny Lei Fleury, the Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft, dialing in all the way from the US. Jenny leads Microsoft efforts to drive great products, services, and websites that powers people and organizations to achieve more. The team is at the forefront of creating positive experiences that apply technology to make a difference in the world and the lives of individuals. From how Microsoft hires and supports people with disabilities in employment, to innovative technology that aims to revolutionize what is possible for people with disabilities. For this segment, we will have two sign interpreters, as Jenny also has a personal sign interpreter on the call. She's doing American Sign Language. The Singapore Sign Language interpreter will remain available. At the bottom left corner of the video, you can see the name indicating which video displays which sign language. Without further ado, Jenny, over to you to share your experiences and perspectives on workplace disability, inclusion, and accessibility. Jenny, please.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to join you this morning and to talk to what we have been doing in the field of accessibility and disability at Microsoft. Next slide. My job is to empower people with disabilities across the spectrum of disability, from vision, hearing, neurodiversity, learning mobility, mental health, and more. Next slide. Disability impacts over 1 billion people around the world. It is the one area of diversity that you can join at any point in life, as the majority of disability is acquired after birth. It can hit you in a permanent way. It can be temporary. It can be something that is situational. But what we do know is that persons with disabilities are impacted negatively in a lot of the demographics. People with disabilities are 1 in 10 have access to the products they need to be successful, and the unemployment rate and underemployment rate, where people are hired for lower than their capability, is twice that of people without disabilities. Next slide. And yet, this is a talent pool, a big talent pool. This is a research study that was done by Accenture, and it compared companies that do great work to hire talent with disabilities as opposed to companies that do not. And it found that the financial results for hiring people with disabilities were significantly higher than those who do not. Double the net income, 30% better performance on economic profit margins. It is quite simply not just the right thing to do, It's the smart thing to do. Next slide. And so we have been working on this for some time. Microsoft first started working on accessibility and disability in the 1990s. And when I joined the company in London in 2005, not to work on disability, to work on Hotmail, if anyone remembers Hotmail, I came not to bring my talent as a person with a disability, but found myself very quickly into the fold. I am severely, profoundly deaf. I do not hear your voice. My voice and my speech is really good. In fact, it's very deceptive, and I was able to hide it. I didn't tell people that I was deaf to the level of which my deafness is. And it wasn't until I knew that I needed assistance or I would not be capable of doing my job that I actually spoke to Microsoft. Now, I lead the company efforts on disability and accessibility. And it has been an amazing journey. We are on a company mission to empower every person and every organization to achieve more. And that includes 1 billion people with disabilities. So I want to give you 3 things to think about as you chart your journey with disability inclusion. Next slide. The first is to think about accessibility like a business. If you do not know that your stuff is accessible, your website, your information, your hiring processes, your marketing campaigns, if you do not know if they're accessible, they are not. And it is really important to measure, to manage, and assess. We have a maturity model that we have built based on the back of other models out there, and it has 7 dimensions to it. The first is hiring talent with disabilities, and we manage through 5 different levels of maturity. It is incredibly important to have employee resource groups within companies that are managed and sponsored by executive leaders. It is incredibly important to have dedicated hiring programs that bring in talent with disabilities, especially in areas like autism. By hiring talent with autism at Microsoft, we have expanded our own diversity and expertise. But we were eliminating that talent by our hiring processes because people with autism were not thriving in interviews. So we don't interview anymore. We bring people in for an academy and we assess their skills. Just one example of how you can grow your maturity. And I encourage you to check this out and see if you can leverage our model for your own environment. Next slide. And then I would encourage you to lean in to the technology that is now freely available in so many products that are out there. 57% of people can benefit from accessibility, but we know 1 in 10 are using it. That's a big gap. We need to solve it because this is technology that can help. This is one example. This was Swetha, who is a deaf engineer at Microsoft. She wanted to make it easier to lip read and to see people on the screen, so she created Blur. She also worked with the team to build captioning right into the product that anyone can turn on at any time. And during COVID, this feature has been used 30 times more than before COVID, if I compare April versus February. It's an incredible feature. Next slide. Another. This is Accessibility Checker. And as you'll see, this is a simple feature that we put next to spell check, so it was easy to find and easy to use, and checks any document to make sure that it is inclusive and accessible for anyone who wants to read it. What it does is it checks the document, it sees that there's a picture, it automatically adds descriptions to that picture, which empower the blind and low vision and gives you the opportunity to edit it. If pictures do not have descriptions behind them, the blind will not know that there is a picture and they will not know what is in the picture. We wanted to make it easier for people to make anything accessible, because you do not know if there is somebody in your organization, in your email distribution group, who has a disability. 70% of disability is invisible and not apparent to the eye. Do not believe that there is no one in your team with a disability. You will not know. Make this a practice whenever you are sending anything. Next slide. And my third point that I really want to stress is that accessibility can be learned. How to work, cooperate, communicate, and partner with people with disabilities are all skills that can be learned. What I see over the last 15 years is that people get nervous when working with me. I am a deaf person who works with an ASL interpreter most of the time. People try to speak to my interpreter, not to me. People ask my interpreter what I would like for lunch, not me. Remember that there are very simple things, but they mean a lot. Speak to the individual. Do not speak to their carer or interpreter. Ask if you are unclear what language to use. And listen to how they refer to themselves. Get educated. At Microsoft, we ask every employee to take training on accessibility. That has been a fantastic journey that we have been on. And recently we put our training online so that you can take our Microsoft training and take it yourself, or use what we put out there for your own training, for your own company. This is a global thing that we do, and it's never been more important, because in this time of COVID, of the at-home, stay-at-home, educate-at-home, remote world that we are all living in right now, it has never been more important to be inclusive, to be accessible, and to power people with disabilities. Because I do not want to see that unemployment gap grow. This is our opportunity for an inclusive recovery. And so I really ask all of you, be creative, be smart, and work together with Microsoft, with every other company out there, to build a new future for people with disabilities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny. Your sharing is absolutely inspirational. And the journey that Microsoft has undertaken is so amazing. I have so many questions to ask you. But before we do that, I would like to bring in the second speaker from Microsoft, Ms. Pratima Monka, to join us in our conversation. Pratima is the APAC lead for the Cloud Partner Business, the sales and marketing organization. She spearheads the work Microsoft does to empower customers of all sizes to digitally transform their businesses with solution partners. Additionally, she's a member of the APAC Diversity and Inclusion Council and chair for accessibility. In this role, she leads the work to make Microsoft a trusted accessibility partner to their customers and partners. But first, let me direct the first question to Jenny. The accessibility evolution model is very inspirational. Just like to ask, how has Microsoft applied that model on itself to advance your own accessibility journey?
So I came into the role of Chief Accessibility Officer 5 years ago. And when I came in, there was no vehicle for managing and measuring and assessing how mature we were as a business. So we set about building this model so that we would have an operational framework that would scale across the 160,000 employees at Microsoft. And we have been using it ever since. And I would say that it has really powered us with smart information on where we are succeeding and where we are not, and where I need to put more focus on and to make sure that we are able in pushing the business forward across all of the 7 dimensions and also across all of the divisions, from Xbox to Windows to Office to HR. And so it's been a very powerful tool, which is why we shared it in May this year.
Awesome. With the current COVID situation, Jenny, do you see any acceleration or deceleration in any aspects of the maturity or the evolution model for Microsoft?
We have definitely seen more use of accessibility during COVID. I mentioned that captioning has grown 30 times during COVID. If I just look at April versus February, that is one of many accessibility features that has grown in use. The other I would call out is the immersive reader, which is a tool that we have built into our browser to power kids with dyslexia and power anyone reading really tough to read documents. We saw that grow by 560%. So we've definitely seen a lot of use growth in accessibility. And we've seen a lot of need from people with disabilities. Our Disability Answer Desk, which is our free support environment for people with disabilities, grew nearly over 200%, nearly 300% in volume from people asking questions. So yes, those are indicators that we look at as we look at the overall maturity. I think it is representative of the need out there for more technology in the virtual world. And I would say that we've learned a lot. We've already launched a lot of features based on feedback that we've been given, and there's a lot more that we need to do.
Makes a lot of sense. I think with the COVID crisis, Microsoft as a technology company and as a trailblazer on the journey of inclusion and accessibility has indeed made even more progress in these aspects. But for our audience who are not Microsoft, for companies who are thinking about embarking on this disability inclusion journey, I wonder what advice do you have, drawing from your experiences, in terms of what are the potential challenges that they should expect when they start on this journey?
I think the most important thing with disability is to start. That is always, people worry about starting. I would say get on that journey, get going. And I think it is so very important to really start to manage and measure where you are with your accessibility in your environment, and to really start assessing how accessible your products are or not, and then start having the conversations with people about how you raise the bar on accessibility, whether that is your buildings or digital. Remembering that buildings are just as important and empowering to people with disabilities and our cities and our environment as the digital and information landscape. The types of obstacles you will get is people not understanding how important it is, not understanding the impact that it can have. If people start saying, well, how many people is this going to really impact? I would say it's not about that. This is about inclusion or exclusion. And do you want to exclude? Because without accessibility, you will exclude. And that's a very important principle, and something I would say that I've used a lot over the years.
Thanks a lot, Jenny. That's very encouraging for us and the audience to hear. Indeed, it is not just the right thing to do, it is also the smart thing to do. And as what you have shared, it is also not very difficult to do. You just have to start. I'd like to bring the second speaker, Pratima, into the conversation. Pratima, being based here, and I just want to hear what are some of the challenges and learnings if we can bring it down to the local level that you have seen?
Yes, I think a lot of the discussions up to now have been really inspiring. Thank you, Jenny, and thanks to everybody for bringing us in onto this. I think before I go into our local challenges and local ideas, I want to just also add one more point to what Jenny just talked about on what is really critical for us to do. One thing that I have learned in Microsoft is that accessibility cannot be an afterthought or a bolt-on or an initiative by people, by organizations. It really needs to be core to your mission. That's what we have learned under Satya's leadership. We made accessibility core to our Microsoft mission. And our mission is to empower every person, every organization on this planet to achieve more. So this is not about just our products or the services that you offer to your customers. It really is about making it part of your DNA, making it part of what we are doing on a day-to-day basis, how we show up to work with each other and with our customers and partners. So it's really about the passion of embedding accessibility into the DNA of the company, into the culture, into the systems, and into the products, so that there is innovation and that really leads to a sustainable future. So I would strongly urge everybody here to think in that model of getting started, embedding it into a vision, strategy, and the engagement, the people, the culture. Now that is really what is a blocker or what could be the key challenge that one faces when one gets started. Being able to articulate that vision, that strategy, that people, that culture, and then adding on to that the momentum that you need. Things like what are the investments? What could be the training that you need to give people? Is there any innovation that you need to do to be more accessible? It's a journey. So I think, very critical that we need to understand where we are on that journey. What is our own pace? What is the starting point? And every one of us needs to define that for our own organizations, maybe even our own departments, our own teams, our own groups. Realize that this is a journey and get started. Now, in APAC, particularly, I think the work that we have done with SG Enable has been a huge learning for us. And I really thank Winnie and the SG Enable team for taking us on this journey. And when we started, we actually sat down and thought about this point very carefully. While our organization had a large vision and we were committed to making it part of our DNA, we then started thinking that where are we on in our own area, in our own countries here. I'll share with you a real situation where last year when we did this, we then decided to work closely with SG Enable to open up internships for people with disabilities. And we did internships across last year and this year. And I'm so proud of the journey of our interns in a technical field to get in. Many of them have done certifications in Azure, data science, Power BI, built applications, assistive technology, as well as general applications. And this entire journey has been a learning experience, not just for the interns, but for our own teams. And we're going forward on the next steps. So awareness, making it, as I said, part of our DNA, was built upon the experience of bringing in interns and working with interns and going down the path. That has branched out into mentorships, on looking at deeper relationships so that we can go into hiring into our units, etc. And this is what I mean by saying making it a part of our DNA and not a bolt-on or an afterthought. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely, Fatima. Thanks for your sharing. And indeed, there's a lot of impact that we can deliver. But I think what's core to understand and take away really is indeed make inclusive and accessibility core to the mission, part of your DNA and part of your culture. That's helpful. We have already quite a number of questions coming in from the audience. And I actually have a couple of questions that I would like to ask either Jenny or Fatima. So feel free to take them. The first one came from an anonymous attendee. He says, where does an organization, or perhaps how does an organization start to get ready for disability inclusive hiring? If I'm not a leader or a director in the company, how do I get in? How do I get buy-in from bosses? Any experience to share?
Jenny, do you want to start and then I can add?
Please. It's a very common question. And I would maybe share a little bit about my journey. I joined in 2005. I joined not to work. I joined as a leader that would drive in Hotmail at the time, and then other parts of the business. I really got involved in the disability work through my own disability. I joined the employee group. I then joined the deaf group. Then I joined every other group. There are actually 22 groups at Microsoft. And I was able to learn through there the level of talent that there was. In fact, there's many individuals who've been here for over 20 years with disabilities. And I would say that, people with disabilities are in every part of your company, whether you realize it or not. We have many senior leaders with disabilities who have recently shared their journey. There's a beautiful story from a corporate vice president who shared his Chuck Edwards, which I'm sure we'll share the link in the chat window by the time I finish talking. And I would say, so one, know that it is already there. But if you are looking to take it further, there are plenty of opportunities to do that. I think the first is to see disability as the talent pool. The second is to build your business case. And the third is to have the right conversations with the right people. We did that with the autism hiring program in 2015. That was an idea of 3 of us, myself and 2 others. 2 of us are parents of kids with autism. We could see the talent. We could also see that there was a very high number of individuals with autism with 2 to 4 year degrees that were not getting into the right level of employment, and a lot of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And so we built, by looking at the data, we built the business case, and we said, hey, we're going to start a pilot, and went and spoke to the bosses. They yes. And that has now grown into 100 hires over 12 divisions of Microsoft. I think it is about being strong, but really also thinking about this as a talent pool and building a strong business case that goes with it.
Yes, and let me add to that, Tony, a little bit of our experience here in Singapore and APAC. In fact, some really good examples from New Zealand. I support the work that we do at New Zealand also. As Jenny just said, it is about recognizing the need within our employees. So employee resource groups, that really helped. Getting some training out, like the accessibility one-on-one training that Jenny talked about a little while earlier. But I think what really gave impetus to the work that we did were a few very simple things, which were actually building on what is our core strength. Microsoft's core strength is the tech. So what we did was that we built something called an AI for Accessibility Hackathon, We did that last year and we plan to do it again this year, where we brought in our tech, our AI tech like cognitive services, etc. But we did not try to resolve for it ourselves alone. We brought in our partners. I come from the partner world. As you know, I lead the work that we do with IP partners. We brought in IP partners from across of APAC. In Singapore alone, we had 150 odd participants who joined us. And we also worked closely with SG Enable to help define problem statements, which technology could resolve. And ran a hackathon, got proof of concepts out, went up and we got some grants out, etc. But the reason why I'm sharing this story is because post that, Tony, you will not believe the number of people who reached out to me and said, we would like to think very hard about hiring. And these people were not just Microsoft, but from our partners. People who came back to us and said, this opened our eyes and we want to be able to use assistive tech, even outside the hackathon format to be able to actually build. So the moral of this story is really when we get started and we do a small activity, a step forward in this fashion, building on our core strengths as a company and involving maybe people around our company as well as our partners, you immediately open up a ripple effect of opportunities that come up and potential discussions. Embed that, underpin that with things like mentoring, simple things we can do like CV, CV support, for example, or these kind of small building blocks can add up to building the power of increased value.
It makes a lot of sense. I think the message here really is the movement can be ground up. You can create the business case. You can create better awareness. I think when there is a will to do it, you'll find a way to do it. And it doesn't need to start from the leaders or the process. Everybody can do something. I just want to do one more question because they are just all streaming in, but we are running out of time. Just another question from, and Jenny, feel free to, and Pratima, feel free to add to this. The question is really quite simply, how can other employees be better allies for people with disabilities?
It's a great question. Let me be blunt. If we do not have allies supporting this cause, it will not move forward. And so it is utterly incumbent on us all to be invested in how we can be good allies for disability and every other aspect of diversity. I think the number one is get educated. I want confident people out there that feel good about how to work and communicate with people with disabilities. Get comfortable with the language. There are some standards out there. Every human is different though. And so get comfortable with the standards, but also be ready to listen and learn what other people are doing and saying. I would also say play with the tools. You go the next time, you're all in front of computers right now. Go and mess around with the accessibility settings and see how they work. Turn on a screen reader, play with it. Ask someone how they're using their technology. Do not be shy. This is all part of the experience. If they don't want to share or not in that place where they can, they won't. But asking, I think, is part of the joy. So really get educated on how to communicate, get educated on technology, and then bring your creativity going forward. Because with unemployment rates the way they are right now, with COVID the way that it is right now, it's never been more important. And there are so many closed doors that need opening. And so ask individuals, what drives you nuts? What's frustrating to you? And take that feedback. You're all incredibly smart people. I empower you to make a change that will make another person with a disability feel more included and be able to apply for a job, get a job, and stay in a job. Make a difference.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jenny, and thank you so much, Pratima. There's so many questions coming in for both of you. We simply can't take them all. Rest assured, we will share the questions with Jenny and Pratima, and we can take this offline because we absolutely have to move on.
Thank you.
Actually, thank you, no problem. But before we move on to our second set of speakers, I'm actually curious to hear what you are thinking, the audience. We have a small poll to hear you and to poll what you're thinking so far. The first question you have in front of your screen: do you think the concept of work will change with the current situation? Do you think the concept of work will change with the current situation? Click yes or no, and very quickly we'll be able to see the results of the group that we have here. And right now we have 648 participants. I'll be quite curious to hear from you whether you think with the COVID situation, with the changes in the way consumers buy and consume, the way workforce arrange themselves, do you think the concept of work will change the current situation? Give us an answer, yes or no. And we have the results. 94% of you voted yes. The concept of work will change. And I think you are probably saying will change for the better and will change permanently. This is very interesting to know. And this is consistent with a recent survey that we've seen done on the Singapore workforce. Close to 90% of the Singapore workforce prefers some form of work from home arrangement to continue even after the crisis. But what's interesting to note that most of it does not want this to be a fully work from home arrangement. So a bit of work from home, but not too much. Very interesting. We've just learned from Jenny and Pratima on their approach to increase workplace disability inclusion and accessibility. We've briefly touched on the current situation, COVID crisis changing some of this. Let us now take a step back and maybe go deeper into the future of work. How the future of work will look like. In today's world, we have all seen that a lot is changing. And COVID-19 has not just changed the world, but also the very DNA of our work. Let us understand a bit more how the future of work will look like and how we can make this inclusive. To do this, I'll bring in our next speaker, who's a real expert on this topic and someone very familiar to myself. He's actually none other than my colleague, Mr. Sharad Vishwanath from Korn Ferry. Sharad is a senior client partner and the regional head of our transformation practice, supporting clients to emerge stronger from complex organization and people issues that are typically big roadblocks to any transformation implementation journey, especially stemming from strategic digital or business shifts around adapting to the future of work. So now, Sharad, over to you to tell us a bit more about the future of work.
Thank you so much, Tony. It was, first of all, a warm welcome to all our participants. It is truly heartwarming and inspirational to see the degree of participation. And I must congratulate both Jenny as well as Pratima for a very inspirational kickoff to the session. And I think, as was very well put by Jenny and Pratima, we need to understand that the case for inclusion and the case for working with people with disabilities is a smart decision. It is a decision which actually has accelerated in its relevance in today's day and world, right? So with that, let's spend some time looking at a lens of the future of work. What is the future of work? Where is it going? How has the current crisis impacted it, right? So what you see in front of you is a lens which we have built out, which kind of looks at the future of work and actually says to us now that the future of work is actually here. We used to talk about the future of work as something which was around, at the horizon, we were trying to embrace. But currently, as we all know, literally in the snap of a finger, in less than a day, sometimes a week, we switched completely the way we used to work. And not just in one geography, not just in one company, not just in one function, but across the globe and universally. There are many clients I have been speaking to in the past 3 or 4 months who are now fundamentally relooking at the way they will work going forward. Now, that really opens up a, a fair degree of possibilities for the way we look at inclusion and diversity and including people with disabilities. Jenny very rightly pointed out the understanding of those disabilities, how that can benefit us from as a company, as a people, and more importantly, as individuals is very important. But also important is to look at how that will help us accelerate to the future of work, which we know is already here. So I will encourage you to look at 3 lenses of how the future work has already arrived. One is on workplace norms. 2 is on workforce diversity. And 3 is on talent management. Now, on workplace norms, we heard about accessibility being important and how easy it can be to start, but how difficult it can be to sustain. But if you look at the ongoing trend in most of my conversations with CEOs and management teams, there's clearly a workplace culture which is evolving, which is now more about investing in people and teams and customers and less about bottom line. What does that tell you? The reason why millennials join a particular company, our research tells us, is for purpose. That purpose-led organization is now the center of how organizations are evolving. And this has to be a part of that purpose because it makes business sense, because it makes people sense, and most importantly, it allows you to expand the landscape and the canvas you're operating on. But this will not happen on its own. It will need specific shifts in workplace norms. It will need specific ways you work on inclusive design. It could be investments in remote infrastructure to ensure scaling. We just heard Jenny beautifully talk about it, how engineer did that when it came to the functionality of closed captioning in their particular technology. She talked about accessibility. Those are just few examples of how Microsoft, which is an amazing example of this globally, has brought it to life. But I'm sure if you look at your organizations, you will find those opportunities to raise, make the business case. Everybody on the front line can and be the change you want to be. Second is on workforce diversity. It's important to know that as of now in the future of work, the focus is on decentralization. Decisions need to get taken at the coal face. How will you make that happen? Find the best person to do the job anywhere. That's the ethos. And the best person to do the job could be a person with disabilities. What are you doing as an organization to make that happen, right? The rise of the gig economy is here. We've been talking about it, but more and more focus in terms of workplace models for companies are moving towards the gig economy. That gives even more opportunity for people with disabilities to join into the workforce. On talent management, it is extremely important to know that HR and work tech is now being used to manage employee experience. That is directly linked to how you can ensure that your inclusive design allows you to access this really attractive talent pool, which this thus far could have been hidden, but also how you're giving them a positive employee experience, just like you would for any other one, right? And last but not the least, you heard about the internship program that Prathama talked about. So reskilling, upskilling, career pathing, and figuring out what development support is required for all your employees, but specifically for people with disabilities, is now a need. It's anyway happening. So use the wave to actually ride the wave and get ahead of competition. The second piece, which I wanted to focus on, which if we can move to the next slide, please, is on opportunities and challenges of remote working. I will not belabor the point, but just point out that there are two lenses, the employer lens and the employee lens. And if you look at the employer lens, clear opportunities which we see now is revisiting your operating model to know what will be changed because the way of working is shifting. And that would have to include looking at people with disabilities because it makes business sense. The second is, how are you redesigning work? How are you redesigning workplace? How are you redesigning the way you're going to run your company? That's important to know. And the challenges are, if we don't think of the right technology, if we avoid building the right culture, I think very well mentioned was it started with the way Satya was thinking about, and we've been privileged to be part of the culture shift which Microsoft has taken globally, but that's very important. We do need that inspirational leadership. From an employee perspective, know that we need to focus on improved inclusivity by opening possibilities for people with disabilities and their caregivers. We need to know that's the pool which we can address both as managers, as colleagues, and of course as leaders. And then exploring alternate avenues where we look at skill development, reskilling this pool because it's available, has the base level skills which we need to be able to craft, let's say, new digital skills, which everybody needs irrespective of which function you belong to. But we need to ensure that as employees, we're also fostering positive relationships. We're ensuring that we are making every minute of our relationships count because the diffusion between work and other lines are going away. The last thought I wanted to share with you focuses specifically on how the future of work is allowing us to look at, and for people with disabilities to look at their future. There are 6 fundamental points. We feel that the current crisis will actually open up jobs which were traditionally not open. For example, sales, because we do know that now everybody is looking at virtual sales and selling. How can you think out of the box? How can you include and look at this talent pool to fund some of that growth which you're looking for? PWs, these people with disabilities, can actually get involved in designing the work environment because this is exactly how the work environment is changing currently. As we heard, there's a client, which is a banking client of mine, which is going to have 60,000 people globally work from home till end of the year. And after that, 40% of them will permanently work from home, and 60% who do come back will still spend 2 days out of 5 days working from home. So we are fundamentally redefining the way we work, which allows for flexi hours, which is what the need is for large employee base. And guess what? Also for people with disabilities. Remote workers are and have to be considered at par with office workers and by managers. That's the mindset shift. We've already talked about assistive technologies and accessible spaces to be deployed in the office, but we as organizations, and some organizations are also making that effort for it to be deployed at homes. And we should take that initiative because, again, it makes business sense. And finally, but most importantly, we've heard over the past 4 months on a very key leadership and managerial skill. It's about resilience. And guess what? People with disabilities have been displaying that competency and skill and that behavior for a very, very long time. You have an inspirational example in Jenny, just the way she described how she joined, and she's been able to transform the way Microsoft looks at people with disabilities and accessibility. So this is a great role model for the rest of us to learn and know how to handle adversity, how to build resilience.
Thank you.
So that's what I wanted to share, Tony. In fact, I would love for your perspective on this, because I know you do a lot of work on transformation and change as well.
Thank you, Sharad. It is indeed very exciting, and I share your point of view that the time to move is now, and the window of opportunity has indeed opened up for people with disabilities, because COVID has indeed changed the way we work. My favorite example is Starbucks, which used to emphasize in-store experience, but now is pivoting to a pickup store concept, which doesn't require customer seating and with a lower in-store manpower needs. In a pandemic, being contactless and efficient and going fully digital has both helped top line and bottom line of businesses like Starbucks. In Singapore, we also see many of my clients pivot very quickly when the crisis hit. A regional online furniture store during circuit breaker, or what we call lockdown here in Singapore, quickly channeled its in-store employees to man its online channels and dramatically improve its online pre-sales, turnaround time, and most importantly, customer online experience. Another client, which is in the florist business, used this opportunity to push its online flower subscription business model. Because people stay at home more, they start to decorate their houses more. The idea of having flowers sent to your home regularly, even when there are no special occasions, suddenly become very, very appealing. What does this mean? This means, as businesses, as what Jenny said, this is not just the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do. And we should not waste this crisis. We often reference the idea, Sharad, of being able to see the opportunity in a crisis. Besides the commercial opportunity, and I completely agree with you, Sharad, another big opportunity that is now presenting itself is the ability of companies to tap the diverse pool of talent, including people with disabilities, and leverage the remote working arrangement that is more and more going to be the norm. I'm just wondering, Sharad, what are some of the challenges that you see for remote working for both employers and employees across different industries? Do you think some industries are more ahead of the curve than others?
Very interesting question, Tony. And I think the jury is out on some industries being ahead of the others, but I will give you my perspective. I think the first challenge for most firms is that are they, and we ran this research, as you're aware, on inclusive design when it comes to diversity and inclusion, especially when it comes to people with disabilities. And we find that a lot of the HR systems is designed for the reference man, as we like to call it, right? The default majority user, typical male, white, able-bodied person, right? I think we need to fundamentally revisit that as we look at our organization and human capital models. That's a big leap, but I think if there is any time, it is now, because you're anyway looking to shift the way you are working. So why not take a hard look on something which allows you to actually accelerate towards a gig economy, which is exactly where people with disabilities can fit with some support, but with thought through support, with logical support, with strategic support. which is why you need inclusive design in talent systems. And if I look at it, that has to be about 4 basic principles. Define equality. And as he said, it's the right thing to do. It's about inclusion or exclusion. And that's what we need to focus on. Unearth inequities. What's causing the issue? What is it that causing the friction for our friends who are with disabilities to be a part of the integrated workforce? Learn from diversity. As we said, resilience can be learned from our friends, but at the same time, learn from their perspective on how things could be done differently and better, or with constraints, which we all say we want to think out of the box. Well, guess what? This could be one source of inspiration. And then finally, solve for one, but benefit has to be for all. So these are some 4 anchor principles and challenges which we find some of the industries facing. But to your point, I think some of the industries which are really leading, Tony, I would say would be technology. I would say would be banking, despite the fact that they have branches which require front-facing customer interaction. But I do see clear green shoots in the way they're approaching and using technology to distribute work, to ensure that you can work from anywhere, the way they're building agile teams. And therefore, for me, it's a very short leap for them to really take a big leap when it comes to inclusion of people with disabilities.
That's really helpful, Sharad. In fact, it is we probably shouldn't be looking, if you are looking to whether to hire people with disabilities, you probably shouldn't be looking at your peers.
Yeah.
In fact, I do see this as a competitive advantage. And one key insight I have, especially during this COVID situation, in today's highly uncertain operating environment, being highly agile is key. As you mentioned, finding the right person to do the job is key. And companies who can pivot quickly are those who have already invested in their digital business, and that now the opportunity is with the digital transformation as indeed to look into inclusive design, to redesign some of your processes, systems, and way of working in an inclusive manner, to differentiate yourself from your peers. The furniture store that I talked about, the florist shop that I talked about, they're doing what their peers are not doing by investing ahead in a digital business, in e-channels. And today, the opportunity is indeed on tapping the distributor workforce, on leveraging remote working. You don't have to wait for your peers. Look at some of the best practices outside of your industry, and I think adopt some of them if they are applicable for your company. That will help you successfully differentiate yourself from the rest. We have some questions, coming from the floor. Let me just pick up some of them. One is quite interesting, and this is maybe Sharad, you can share some insights. How does a recruiter like Korn Ferry help to influence employers to change mindsets towards more inclusive hiring? Maybe I'll share a bit, and then Sharad, you can jump in.
Sure.
I think Korn Ferry, as one of the largest executive search firm and recruiter in the world, we have a responsibility to do the right thing. And here it includes inclusive hiring, as what Jenny has mentioned. It is not just the right thing, it is also the smart thing to do. And companies who have undertaken an inclusive approach, not just in hiring, but also incorporating inclusivity as part of its DNA, as core its mission, has seen superior business performance. I think that in itself is absolutely crucial in influencing the conversations that recruiters like ourselves with top executives when thinking about the talent they can access and they should bring into the company. Our research has shown that having an inclusive culture does not just promote higher employee engagement, but also drives higher productivity. And this has a direct impact on your bottom line. Sharad, do you have anything else to add?
Absolutely. I think you made a very, very pertinent point, which I would just like to build on. I think when you look at diversity of thought and inclusion in the broader sense, and specifically even with people with disabilities, I think we as a firm try and operate on two parameters. One is when we are helping firms recruit the right talent. The other is when we're helping firms change and think differently through our advisory practice. We just talked about inclusive design. That is something we are now actively talking to clients because it makes business sense. I'll just add one build to the point you just made. Diversity and inclusion is a business reality. Why? If you have people with different diverse perspectives, it is proven and has been actually proven both in terms of race, ethnicity, disability, etc., that you will design a better product. You will look at a better process. Your marketing will be smarter because perspectives of people, depending on where they come from, an ethnicity, race, with disability, what kind of disability, are different. So how are you making your products, your processes, your messages more aligned to what folks would want to hear is equally important. So having people with a diverse background, having people who understand what living with a disability is as a part of your workforce, as a part of your product team, as a part of your process teams, is very, very critical from a business perspective.
That's really helpful. I think we'll take one last question, and actually this question is directed to you, Sharad. And it is another type of diversity. I guess it is more demographically related, and this is talking about people with disabilities in their 40s. So you might be aware, Singapore is a rapidly aging society, and if you look at our workforce demographic, the bulk is moving to the 40s and 50s. In the next 10 years, more than 70% of our workforce will be above 40 years old. From your interactions with the clients and looking at how they are hiring, how can we encourage them towards the benefits of looking at people, not just with disabilities, but also people who are in, I guess, the second half of their career, who are slightly older, who probably needs to be reskilled and upskilled. How should we be actually looking to help the people at the mid-career who are in their middle age?
I think that's a great question. My perspective on this is slightly different. So let's look at some facts. We know that currently the overall life expectancy is growing in the world. We know certain populations, you mentioned Singapore, there's Japan, China to a certain extent, and even the US and countries in Europe, which means that the workforce will shift to the left when it comes to age, right? That does not mean that the workforce has become ineffective. What it does mean is that we need to realize at whatever age group we are, at 30, 40, or 50, that learning continuously has become of paramount importance. Why? Because the curve of skill depletion, the curve of skill obsolescence has gone up, in the sense that our research is telling us that skills become obsolete in now 4 to 5 year cycles. Look at where we are today. Look at the skills which are emerging. We know that our children will actually do jobs which you don't even know exist today. Therefore, to presume that people over 40 or 50 or 60 cannot learn and therefore redeploy, especially in areas which are high growth. For example, in technology, in larger e-commerce, there are lots of opportunities, healthcare, banking in remote banking, data analytics. I can go on and on and on. If we are focused on reskilling and upskilling at every stage of our career, it is foolish for us to believe that the opportunities would go away. Remember, the talent pool, and we do this for a living on the search side of the house, is very narrow. It's not that you will find 50 data analysts very easily if you wanted them tomorrow. You got to build internally. So why not build that talent pool smartly? Why not be a part of that talent pool? So that's how I think folks at the middle age have to think. For that matter, everybody needs to learn continuously, learn new skills, and where the world is going.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think relearning, upskilling is going to be a permanent fact of working. It is not going to change, not just for people with disabilities, but for the entire workforce.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharat.
Tony, just one example which will actually help bring this to life. So we are working with a global e-commerce major where we are working with veterans who are basically being reskilled to become software engineers, data analysts, and business analysts. This is in their middle age of the career. They're restarting their capability set. And this is what organizations are trying to do because they're creating new talent pools. So the opportunities are there, the programs are there. The organizations and us individually need to tap into that, be that change, be the head of steam, which we want the world to see.
Great. That's really inspirational and heartening to know, Sharat. Thank you, Sharat. And thank you, audience, for all your questions. And we do see a very high level of engagement from you. And very heartened to see that you are following and highly engaged. Now, I think we have to wrap up this morning's discussion. Essentially, I think it is safe to say that work is changing and technology has enabled a more distributed workforce. And over the past few months, COVID-19 has proven and further accelerated this. This has given us access to a somewhat untouched source of talent, amongst which people with disabilities are a valuable pool. The question that now arises is, how can we further enable this distributed workforce with technology? Stay tuned, because this afternoon, we will have Professor Goggin from NTU, the Nanyang Technological University of Singapore, as well as representatives from GovTech, share their insights on how you can enable your workforce to work remotely. In addition, we will have a panel discussion in which some best practices will be shared on how to implement all of this. But before we go into a break, I just want to share some details on SG Enable key initiatives which you might be keen to participate in. The first one is the President's Challenge, an Enabling Employment Pledge. We urge you to lend your support to this national movement to build a caring and inclusive Singapore, where differences in abilities are valued and embraced. The second, and before I go on, feel free to use your phone to take a picture of the QR code where you'll be able to find more details in case you did not catch the full details on the slide. Second one, the Workplace Disability Inclusive Index. Please feel free to use this free online self-diagnostic tool for you to identify key focus areas for your company for inclusive hiring and to find out how inclusive your company is. And lastly, the MediaCorp Enable Fund, MEF. MEF provides financial assistance to meet the last mile needs of persons with disabilities and better integrate them into the society. These are the 3 key initiatives. Feel free to approach the organizers if you did not capture the full details. I hope the morning session have inspired you to take action and given you clarity on why hiring people with disabilities is not just the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do. And it's also not too difficult to do. The secret is to start. And with the 3 initiatives from SG Enable and other schemes and programs that we have in place for you, it is not difficult to start. Feel free to reach out to us. We will flash details of these 3 initiatives again at the end of today. So thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to all of you, the audience. We will now break for lunch, but resume our forum at 1:30. We hope to see all of you back here. Bye-bye for now.